right, guys. So the workflow that we're going to be demoing today is a small business lead generation system that I recently built. And what it does is it basically searches for businesses on Google and it saves it to a Google Sheets, right? So the service that we're using to actually do the scraping and the search is called Serper.dev, and it's a platform that I recently discovered. And I've been using Apify quite a bit, but for this case, I decided to use this because it's also very clean and neat, and the data that is returned is also well structured. So I'm really starting to like this platform. When you do sign up, if you go to dashboard here, you can see that you get 2,500 free sign up credits, and as you can see, I haven't used it up yet. So yeah, it's definitely give it a shot, and you can test it out and play around with it. Also, other thing is billing is not too bad. So if you go to the billing console, you'll see that you get for $50 you get about 50,000 credits. Um, so so we're gonna demo basically how this API works and how the data is returned. So for this case, I'm gonna search for plumbers near northern suburbs, Cape Town, and then South Africa. So if I run this, you'll see that this is the data returned. So this is basically all the data that you'll find on your on the business's Google profile when you search when you're searching for or using this query. So for example, if I actually have to use this and go into Google, let's see. This is the business that we find, right? Um, and you'll see you got your basic information here, and yeah, this is what we're gonna get. So this is the data return. This is what we're gonna be working with, right? So back to the workflow. So the way we kick off this workflow is we started off with a webhook, and this is the trigger node that we're going to be using. And when you click on the node, or when you create the node and start to, well, you need to first execute the workflow. When you do, it will provide you a URL. So this is the webhook URL, and you can just come into Postman or whatever other HTTP client you want to use, copy it in, and then specify exactly, your query parameters or query parameters or body that you want to send over to the node. So for this case, we just need the query and then the country code, because this is what's going to be used to actually run against the API. So as you can see, it's listening for the event. So I actually want to run this to demonstrate the workflow. So as you can see here, I quickly jump to the HTTP request and starting to make calls to the Serper.dev API. So let's start from the beginning, right? As you can see here, this is what was returned. And if we go to JSON, this is the entire HTTP request body or request metadata. And in there, we've got the body tag or the body field, and in there we've also got the query and the country code that we sent over. Right. So the next node is a conditional statement, and what this does, it basically just checks for whether or not the data is valid. So in this case, we just want to check if it exists or not. And in general, what you want to do is you want to have robust error handling in your workflows, especially when you go into production, to ensure that you are tracking exactly every step to make sure that you try your best to get to the happy path of the workflow. So if you don't have those values, it will just essentially error out and then stop the workflow. The next node is a set node, and what we're doing here, if we're just setting up the pages array, essentially what this is going to allow us to do is to query each page for the API. And the reason why we're doing this is because Serper.dev, if you saw earlier, right, it only gives us about 10 results per page, right? You'll see here you can specify the page number here. Now, if I had to do page 2, you will get the second page's data. All right. Now, in order to replicate this, we need to create some form of pagination, and essentially, this is what this sort of section of the workflow is doing. It's essentially doing pagination. So if you go here again, you'll see that I'm creating the field that I want, which is called pages in this case. I'm specifying that name, and then the type is of array, and there's a bunch of other types you can set it to. And then I'm constructing the array where I'm just specifying an array of integers, and in this case, the integers represents page numbers, right? So the output of this will be essentially a array of integers, just exactly how we specified it. This is exactly how we want it to be. And then we have another node called split out node, and what this does is essentially then transforms the array to change the structure so that it matches the data that we need for the API. So in this case, it now turns it into an array of objects where we've got a field called pages, and then also the number or the value, which is the page number. So that's the split out node, and then in the next node we basically preparing the data for to make the request, to make the API request. So for this with the set node, what we can also do is we can actually go back to previous nodes and actually set whatever data was returned from previous nodes, we can actually set it in this node as well. So if you look at this node here, we're getting the data from the previous node, which was the pages value, right? As you can see here, and then we're also getting the query and the country code, which came from the webhook, as you can remember, right? And you can see here it's using some JavaScript to essentially do to grab the data from the previous a few nodes back. And you can see here, you can see here, these are all of the nodes in a list here in the left hand view, and then all you got to do is just essentially drag and drop it into the field. And then the output is basically this array of objects. We've got now the page number and the query code. This is what we're going to run in a loop to the API. So as you can see here, based on that, we've got the loop of items node, and we also have a wait condition, right? So the reason why we have a wait condition here is because we want to prevent the API reaching any rate limits that is set on Serper.dev. So a lot of APIs, most APIs have rate limits, right, to prevent the server from basically crashing out. So ensure that you read the documentation of your API to understand what those API usage limits are. So in that way, you can actually then set up your conditions, your waiting conditions, to ensure that you're not running a bunch of concurrent requests to the API, right? Because that's then going to burn out the API and then cause your workflow to stop. Because then the API will respond with like a 429, which is like a limit exceeded, error codes and things like that. So with this condition, you can see we got a 3-second wait timeout. And then, so what that means is that every time we run the next query, it will wait 3 seconds and then run the next, then run the next call, right? So once the loop is done, it looped over all of the items, it iterated through all of the items. It will then consolidate all the data, and then finally, right, you will get this output, right? Which is just a bunch of data, as you can see here, quite a bit. And they should total between, if you look at it here, there's about 11 runs and about 10 items per run. So that's about just over 100 items essentially that was returned. So once all the data is consolidated, we actually need to sort of clean up the data a bit more, just to ensure that we only are dealing with the data that is relevant to us. So in this case, we used another split out node, and essentially we only care about the places array. All of this other data is basically just redundant data. So we just move this into the fields to split out, and we don't want to do that. And then when we run it, this is the output that we want. So what this does, it then consolidates all of the data in the places array for all of the pages, and then we get this nice, neat structure of places data, right? So in our use case, what we care about more, right, is actually getting businesses that don't have websites. So we're using a conditional statement just to check if the data has this website field. If it doesn't have the website field, then we just ensure that the data is moved to different sheets. And then yeah, this is the final sort of destination. The thing to note with Google Sheets, right, is that you need to have a Google account. So in order to get a Google account, if you have an email address, then you just need to go into Google Cloud. Then you need to set up your OAuth, right? And then specify basically what API services you want to enable. And so to enable Google Sheets, you'll need to have enabled your Google Drive as well as your Sheets API. And then I think you should be sorted out with that. You'll get some OAuth credentials, which is just your client ID and client secret. You'll have to then set it up in n8n and connect it through. And then once that's done, then you should be able to interact with Google Sheets. And then, yeah, that's about it. This is the workflow. So I'm hoping that this video provided you some insight into n8n, how some of the nodes work, and this is obviously a great starting point just to get familiar with some of the nodes, some of the flows, and some of the configurations that you basically need, in order to get starting with this. The reason why n8n became so popular is because of the support for large language models, and specifically AI agents. So the next couple of videos, we also going to be incorporating, some agentic workflows. So that's going to be kind of cool. And then the other thing to note is that I'm running this actually locally. So if you see here, I'm running n8n.trinsale.com. I set this up with Cloudflare. So if you're interested in knowing how to set up anything locally so you can actually run tests and then do some experimentation, then this will be a great video to look out for, because again, you're running it for free, so you're going to be saving quite a bit of money and instead of subscribing to the cloud platform. So yeah, look out for the next video. Until then, cheers, bye bye.